So let's talk about capital markets. What exactly is a capital market? A capital market is simply a financial market where long-term debt or equity-backed securities are traded, basically bought and sold. By this definition, we can basically categorize the assets traded in a capital market into two types. One are the debt securities, which are in form of bonds and in the form of IOUs, and the second are equity securities, which are in the form of shares and in the form of stocks. Now, let's talk about capital markets again. There are two main types of capital markets, and these are the primary capital markets and the secondary capital markets. Let's talk about the primary capital markets. Now, in the primary capital market, basically new equities and bonds are issued and sold to large investors. An example of this is IPOs, which are initial public offerings, where a company that needs funding basically contacts an underwriter and then issues new bonds and issues new stocks to large investors. Now let's go to the second one, which is the secondary capital market. Now in the secondary capital market, existing securities are traded. So these markets are the common ones which are like the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, and we also have the Nigerian Stock Exchange, of course. And in these markets, there are regulatory bodies that oversee the day-to-day transactions. And an example is the Securities and Exchange Commission for the New York Stock Exchange. So basically, this is the flow. A company needs money, they issue new bonds and stocks, large investors buy, this forms the primary capital market, and then after these large investors buy, they go ahead to trade these stocks and bonds among themselves and with other smaller retail investors. In this second market, the initial company who issued these bonds and these stocks do not receive any added liquidity or any added money, but there's basically just trading between various retail investors and large investors, and that forms the secondary capital market.
Oh Jesus. For the struggle.
Alright, so now you know and understand what capital markets are. Let's talk about internet capital markets. First things first, the term internet capital market was coined by Ashke BD. If you are being on Solana blockchain and actively following what is happening, you know that he is a CMO of the Solana Foundation. In fact, Solana originally set out to build the infrastructure for internet capital markets. Now, these are the big ideas that has been explored over the years. So the first thing is to allow anybody with an internet connection access capital markets. That's one. And then two, that Solana is the best place to tokenize assets. And this is backed by on-chain base volume, liquidity, user base, and capital flow, and also funding. And number three, that Solana is intended to be a replacement for traditional capital markets. So no, we are not just talking about an on-chain NASDAQ. We are talking about a full-blown capital market on-chain. Now, according to the Helios blog, internet capital markets reimagine a future of global finance where all asset forms can be traded, they can be owned, and they can be collateralized on a single internet native ledger. And then capital formation becomes smooth and companies can raise funds from a global pool of investors. And then finally, everyone who has a wallet can access investment opportunities. So internet capital markets, the idea is basically driven by two core forces. And the first one is to lower the barrier to asset issuance. Basically, anything can be tokenized under supportive regulatory frameworks and in split seconds, and actually at split cost of what it actually requires if you are launching on traditional capital markets. And then secondly, there is a lower barrier to asset ownership, which means that anyone with a mobile phone or a wallet or mobile internet can basically participate and own these assets that are deployed on chain. What are the issues that are currently in the public capital market? Don't get me wrong, the capital market currently is presumably okay. I mean, everything works. But upon deeper retrospection, we begin to see certain cracks that are appearing in the public capital market. First things first, less companies are doing IPOs. That is a fact. Between last year and this year, which is year on year, we've had an approximately 9% drop in the amount of companies that have done IPOs. The IPO market is shrinking because less companies are incentivized to do IPOs. And also, because less companies are doing IPOs, we are now being restricted to choosing among the big seven. So we talk about Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Tesla. These are the big seven. So everybody who is interacting with the capital market currently, almost everybody is buying from these seven, buying shares of these seven companies. They actually capture a 33% market share of the capital market currently. Another thing is going public is expensive. According to statistics by PwC, software companies that want to do an IPO and earn anywhere between 100 million and 200 million revenue per year have to spend between 7.6 million to 29.5 million dollars for IPOs. I mean, why should it cost so much? And then finally, access to private markets are restricted. Now, when you combine all of these three issues, you start seeing the cracks and you start seeing the reason why internet capital markets have to become a thing. So trust me, it's time for ICMs. Now you understand what capital markets are and what internet capital markets entail. It is time to talk about the Solana and ANZA ICM roadmaps. ICM, of course, by now means Internet Capital Markets. Now, this roadmap was written by some of the biggest industry giants. We talk about Anatoly, Max, Lucas, Austin from Double Zero, Chris, and Kyle Samani. These are all industry giants. So basically, what are they talking about in this roadmap? Let's bring things down to a level ground. Before internet capital markets can work, there are certain trade-offs that must be considered. These trade-offs have been widely discussed on the chain, and we're going to briefly touch these trade-offs before we go straight into the roadmap itself that has been outlined. So now let's talk about the trade-offs. The first trade-off we consider is privacy versus transparency. Should we broadcast orders before execution or not? This is the trade-off. If we broadcast orders, it improves price discovery and execution as market makers can react to the intent of traders and are less hesitant to fill orders. However, some informed traders can gamify the system and front-run less informed liquidity providers and market makers who then become exposed to adverse selection. That is a trade-off. On the contrary, hiding protects market makers. If you hide orders, you protect the market makers and institutional traders from being exploited and also reduce toxic flow. But at the same time, it comes at a cost because execution becomes unpredictable and attractiveness to retail traders drops. The second trade-off we'll consider are speed bumps versus unrestricted trading. Now, speed bumps would reduce adverse selection, which will result in tighter spreads and more liquid markets. However, this also comes at a cost because there will be slower price discovery and there will be reduced volume. Reduced volume because most of the trades which will result in adverse selection are being blocked off. Therefore, there's reduced volume. And the next thing we talk about is collocation versus geographical decentralization. What should we go with here? Collocation is presumably faster. I mean, you have all your servers in the same building, all reacting to the same information, all feeding the same information into the stream, and it appears faster. But come on, if we have geographic decentralization, we're going to have improved price discovery because there's more access to a lot of sources of information. And also we have resilience to local disasters like power failure, grid failure, what have you. So this is also a trade-off to consider. Do we collocate servers or do we go into geographic decentralization? That's it. Pause. Now the fourth trade-off we consider is makers versus takers. Would we prioritize? If you make it makers first, we're going to have more healthy markets with tighter spreads but less attraction to informed traders. If we make it traders first, we'll have a more attractive market to traders but at the expense of makers who are exposed to adverse selection. Another trade-off to consider is retail versus institutional. Do we make it more appealing to retail, or do we make it more appealing to institutional? And of course, this is Solana. I believe you know what the answer to that is. And then we'll go to the next one, which is flexible versus opinionated. Do we enforce one system, or do we allow various systems to coexist and compete? Basically, Solana has made a choice here, and the choice is to be flexible and allow builders to experiment on different ideas. And the final trade-off which we must consider is hybrid versus fully on-chain. Come on, the answer to this is obvious. Solana is planning to be a replacement of traditional capital markets, not a representation of traditional capital markets on-chain. So no, we don't just want an extension of NASDAQ on-chain where everything is still controlled off-chain, but we basically want the entire process from issuing and everything to happen on-chain. So hybrid, I believe, is a no. Fully on-chain.
Low battery mode.
And finally, let's talk about the roadmap itself. This roadmap contains Solana's proposed solutions to some of these trade-offs and also long-term solutions on how it aims to take over as the foundational infrastructure for the internet capital market. Now, this roadmap has been divided into 3 different sections. We have the short term, the medium term, and the long term. Let's talk about the short term. The short term is basically the next 1 to 3 months. So we're talking about projects that are launching in days to few weeks. The first one under this category is the block assembly marketplace, basically Jito's BAM. It was developed by Jito Labs, and this is the first one launching. This BAM has been in the works since the end of 2024, and the testnet is launching in a matter of days. It is basically a processing system which offers powerful tools to traders, validators, and applications for improved performance. It's going to introduce an intra-slot transaction determination which gives precise control over transaction ordering. Already, Drift, Pyth, and DFlow are building BAM plugins that will be used by applications on Solana. How does it work? This is simple. BAM operates via a decentralized network of nodes running inside TEEs, which are trusted execution environments. It is easy to integrate by validators through the Jito Solana client. And finally, it is private, which means transactions are hidden until execution. Now, this BAM is also going to be transparent by leveraging open source code and cryptographic attestations. It is also going to be atomically composable, but within the BAM, not directly on mainnet. It's also going to enable powerful use cases like CLOBs, which are central limit order books. No need to fork validator clients, no BD deals. It's going to be modular with an open sandbox model, combining off-chain and on-chain. It's going to have improved construction of blocks. The validators are going to earn more. And I mean, this is just a lot of benefits and a lot of use cases for the Jito BAM. And finally, it will reduce the gap between CX and decentralized finance-led capital markets. The second one on the short-term roadmap is ANZA's transaction landing improvements. So basically what Anza has been doing to make sure transactions land better. First things first, Anza has been working on fixing QUIC, which are quick UDP internet connection bugs. They have introduced a unified scheduler which is going to be fully implemented in the next update called Agave 2.3. It now includes new TPU clients and will basically dramatically reduce transactions and latency. No, will dramatically reduce transaction send latency. There's going to be live improvements which are already in effect, with most market makers now seeing 95th percentile zero slot transaction latency. What this means is that there is no delay, which means transactions land on the current slots as on the same transactions land on current slots using standard CPU pathway. Finally, these live improvements are already in effect with most market makers, because most market makers now see a 95th percentile zero slot transaction latency, meaning transactions now land on the current slots using standard TPU pathway. So basically, when we combine Jito's block assembly marketplace and we combine Anza's transaction landing improvements, we basically reduce the gap between DeFi and sex quality execution. Now let's talk about the items, the projects that will be launching medium term, which is in the next 3 to 9 months, basically Q4 of 2025 and Q1 of 2026. The first thing here is 00. 00 is simply an ultra-fast private fiber network for Solana, which will drastically reduce latency and increase bandwidth beyond what can be possible on the public internet in ways you've not seen before. That's just basically what this means. And it's going to protect and offload validators. It's going to have a filter layer to block DOS attacks and also reduce traffic load on validators and RPCs. 00 will use multicast, which is a hardware-based packet replication tool to reduce overhead and improve network fairness, transmission speed, and consensus message propagation. Early testnet results have already been blowing the minds. I mean, we have up to 100 milliseconds of reduced latency and 10 times bandwidth improvements for validators. Already 100 validators are on testnet with approximately 3% of mainnet stake. 00 will launch sometime in mid-September 2025. Then we talk about Alpenglow. Of course, Alpenglow is a glowing you got the idea there. Of course, Alpenglow is a glowing brand new consensus protocol for Solana. And Alpenglow will basically reduce the time of block finality from 12.8 seconds to just 150 milliseconds, and also from 32 slots to between 1 to 2 slots. It's going to make MCL implementation easier, as it is very easy to understand. Take note, MCL means multiple concurrent leaders. We expect Alpenglow to launch sometime within late 2025 and early 2026. Finally, the last project or the last item on the medium term is asynchronous program execution, APE. Basically, what this will do is it will remove execution replay from transaction landing, thereby reducing latency. And also, Alpenglow's implementation will remove complexities that will delay APE implementation. So basically, when Alpenglow finally launches, within the next few weeks to months, we should expect APE to be fully implemented, because Alpenglow will basically remove the complexities that have been delaying its implementation. And then finally, we talk about the long term, which we are projecting this project should come alive in 2027. They are currently in development. This long term focuses on just two main sectors, which are the MCL and ACE. MCL meaning multiple concurrent leaders, and ACE meaning application controlled execution. Now, three things are required to build most liquid on-chain markets. First things first, the chain must have more than enough capacity to ingest market relevant information in real time. Secondly, it must have fast confirmation and even faster slot times. And then finally, applications should be able to control their own execution ordering to facilitate experiments with new market microstructures. MCL solves single leader problems. Basically, when we have a single leader, that leader controls what happens within a given block. So a single leader can decide to censor some transactions and not add them, or favor some transactions over the other. With MCL, this is fixed, because if we have multiple leaders for a single block, then if one leader decides to censor a transaction, another leader adds it. So combining data from all these leaders, we have a fairer system that is less dependent on trust and more dependent on theoretical accuracy. Now, if we combine geographical decentralization and multiple concurrent leaders, we create a powerhouse, whereby it becomes easier for Solana to ingest information from around the world at the same time than any co-located infrastructure. This will enable market makers to combine real-time information from various locations in their quoting strategies by reading multiple streams of information into the same smart contract. This feature cannot be replicated by any single server anywhere in the world. Summarily, Solana will offer ICM tools that are unique and cannot be replicated by centralized counterparts. So say this with me: fuck centralization.
Fuck centralization.